Hey, all the people. Hey, it's me. It's Jeff May, and I have cool friends. And this is why we're doing another episode of the show called Jeff Has Cool Friends, because it's my job. I'm very excited. I have one of my favorite people, one of my favorite comedians. He's so flattered. What I would consider to be a kindred spirit in my world. Comedian, podcaster, professional panelist, host, Ken Reid. Ken, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there best as I can. How you doing?
Good. I'm good.
Yeah,
Question mark.
Well, I mean, all New Englanders that make it out to the West Coast are inherently doing better than I am.
At
least for the weather.
The weather's great.
Fires.
I just went for a run before recording this. Now, This is our Christmas special. Normally, I would release this on every other Tuesday. I'm going to drop this episode on Christmas just for fun.
Nice.
Why not?
Nice.
So we're gonna talk about some holiday stuff. We're gonna talk about you. You have such a fascinating life, and our lives are so eerily paralleled.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. We're on different coasts.
That's true.
You know, I still have. It's like 65 degrees today. Like it's
like 20 here.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's gray. Is it gray snow on the ground still, or
no? It is more ice. So it doesn't look as ugly. It's just more dangerous.
It will just kill you so much faster.
Yeah, that's correct.
Because you're out of Boston, as I am too. Interestingly enough, I don't think we met in Boston. I think we met in Los Angeles.
Maybe. Yeah, you're right.
Or no. I realize it right now. I believe we met at the Comedy Studio when I was doing your yard sale show.
Yes, I was doing. I was doing the Secret Menu show.
I was booked on the Secret Menu show. That was, I believe, it was 2013 or 2014.
That sounds right. Yeah.
At the Comedy Studio, it was a lot of fun. You had this penchant for doing not just stand-up comedy, but you had to do something, and it was essentially this kind of yard sale-y auction for a bunch of crap that you had.
Yeah, that was one of the segments. So the deal I made, I hosted Friday nights there for like 5 years, and that's a grind. So I quit, and then the owner of the club was like, "Well, what would you stay for?" And I'm like, "Well, Thursday nights, let me do Thursdays. Don't book more than 3 acts, and then I can do like whatever with the rest of the show." So oddly got him to agree to that. So I would have segments on each show. So one of the segments was called the Damaged Goods Auction. So someone would come up, they'd tell a story about an object they owned. Sometimes I would do it, something that's of like nominal value, like a VHS tape or something, and then they would auction it off to the audience, and they'd get a certificate of authenticity and everything. And shockingly, like stuff like a CD that would sell for $1, people paid like $75 for it. Or like some of the stories, like somebody auctioned off a Santa suit that they bought drunk online one night. Someone auctioned off, they had a 2003 Red Sox program book signed by the entire team and Judge Judy.
Of course.
Because they were down at spring training, and Judge Judy was just there and took the book and signed it and handed it back to him, which makes it basically worthless to any sports people. And so
I would prefer it.
I would too. Someone paid like $100 for it that night. Like I was shocked because people would get, it was kind of like how much they liked the story and how much they liked the show. It was kind of like a fun, almost like a way to tip. And people would get super competitive about it. So that was fun. We also did a segment called the yearbook sessions every episode. So someone would give me their high school yearbook for a week, and I'd go through and make all kinds of notes. And then like we'd just like go through their yearbook on stage for like 20 minutes.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Which was fun. Yeah, we did a segment called TV Casualty, where like something, which is I started doing before I did the podcast, but something they saw on television that was not inherently scary, that traumatized them. We would talk about it, then we'd watch it as a group and like exorcise that.
So like the Punky Brewster cave episode.
Yeah, Perils of Punky came up a few times.
I was going to say that must have been every week. Someone's like, remember when Brandon was Bones? That was scary.
There were some weird ones. One was like the beginning of the Wide World of Sports. There's a skier that wipes out.
Yeah, that's the agony of defeat guy.
Yep. And then we ended every show with everyone that was on the show got on stage, and I showed a trailer for a weird movie, and then we just kind of like went down the line, with people's reactions if they would see that movie or not. And it was fun.
It was a lot of fun. That to me, like, you ran what was essentially a Nerd Melt specific kind of show. If you've ever performed at Nerd Melt, which I know you did, I believe you recorded an album there, right?
Yeah, I did my second record there. Yeah,
so
I did the Meltdown show a few times.
So it would make sense that would be the sort of direction that would be where you would fit really well, because that was a place where if you ran just a comedy show, it wasn't really going to take off. Like,
yeah, what's the point? Like,
yeah,
it's especially locally in Boston. Like, no one really has a fan base here, and no one, especially then. And so, you know, people would just. To me, I always equated it like if you said, "Hey, you want to go see a movie?" And you'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And we're like, "Well, we're going to the AMC in Danvers." And I'd be like, "Yeah, well, what are we seeing? Movie. It's a movie show."
Yeah,
and you're like,
it's conceptually a film.
I don't know, you know. So it made like kind of a. We started selling out often, and Thursdays were pretty light generally. But people didn't even care who was on. Like, they just knew they were going to see a weird show, and I'm like, that's kind of ideal.
I tried doing something like that with Mint on Card, where because you've done the show Mint on Card, which we do at Blast from the Past in Burbank, and you basically you do stand up, but you're standing in front of like this big wall of toys. And I tried incorporating a rule in the show where you had to start your set with "my favorite toy growing up." Like, that was the sentence starter, and just nobody did it.
Yeah, that's the thing about comics. Like, it taught me that comedians aren't. A lot of them are not funny off the cuff.
Yeah.
Many of them would just want to do their act, even if they do that act for no people. They just want to like plow through their thing. And so I try to book people for those segments, and they'd be like, "Well, can I do a set?" And I'm like, "No, we're going to be on stage for 20 minutes, just like being funny." Like, why?
They're like, "I don't know how to do that."
Yeah, like 5 other places. Like, why are you doing that?
That is something that I very much noticed about Massachusetts, and specifically the smaller towns. I know Boston is a little bit bigger, and so you're going to have a little bit more diversity. But my God, man, I don't know how many shows I've done in like Worcester or like Salisbury, and it's always like a guy whose credit he's been doing stand up for 30 years, and then it's just him doing Monica Lewinsky jokes.
Yeah,
and you're like, "Hey, man, that was like a while ago."
It's a weird pocket universe here where, like, a lot of people were. I mean, I don't know what it's like now because I haven't really been out and about because of the pandemic. Although I still see people posting things like "killed it at Jose McSwiggins," and there's like 4 people there, and I'm like, it's a global pandemic, and that show was shitty before that, right? Now that it's like dangerous to do, you're still okay. They're almost like LARPing in order to do like a 5-minute set on Johnny Carson. I'm like, that doesn't exist. It's not a thing anymore, right? It hasn't been for a long time.
There are the guys that think that they're like, "Oh, someday when they call my number, I'm going to be ready." And it's like, dude, you're telling the same bad jokes in the back of an Italian restaurant in Danvers.
Yeah, like, I mean, at least if it was a Mexican restaurant, it'd be better. But it's younger people too. Like I would often see, younger people who were like, "I did 3 sets tonight." I'm like, "Yeah, you went to 3 open mics and you performed for 4 people who were also comics."
I would say that there is something important about when you're younger in comedy, getting the repetitions in. And obviously, not everybody comes out of the gate being a prodigy at 19.
Sure, these people are like 5 or 6 years in.
Yeah, I think the grinding aspect is something that you do kind of have to shuffle off in stand-up. I would say
that's after year 2, that's gone.
Agreed. But I think it took me a little bit longer because I just wanted to I just wanted my swings in. And then it got to me like, oh, well, I can actually be more careful with what I choose, and then I can be better at comedy because I have crowds to work with.
Yeah, or like I always say that it's a couple things. One, if you stayed at home that night and watched TV, maybe you would have thought of some new stuff based on it. Number 1, rather than just seeing the same crap. 2, there's, it's basically you get comfortable on stage and then that's what you need. But a lot of people end up, it becomes their social life. So they use that as an excuse to be like, "It's my social life," but they don't want to say that.
Yeah, they're like, "These are all my friends. I see them once a week."
Yeah. And you also end up getting people who are like, I don't know, 3 years into comedy and they're on stage and they're doing jokes about shows they did. Like, "I told that show to gig once," and I'm like, "Nah, you should be talking about anything but that.
Yeah, you don't want to have that happen. Yeah, there is
Writing songs
definitely.
about songs.
I definitely feel like there is that divide in like the local scenes versus what you would consider to be more national scenes or larger cities, and it's not to the fault of smaller towns and cities that don't necessarily have the opportunities, but like, I mean, Boston is a really good example of the fact that like there isn't a lot of diversity, and I'm not just talking about skin color. I'm talking about style and ability, and everybody, it seemed to me when I started that everybody was trying to be Louis C.K.
Yeah, I mean that's always the case. Though not always him, but there's always someone they're trying to be. Like when I first started, it was like Mitch Hedberg, and then it morphed into Louis C.K., and then it morphs into Bill Burr or whoever it is.
Yeah,
to me, it was more people would get kind of career ambitious without getting creatively ambitious at all, which is completely backwards. And in cities where there isn't a lot of opportunities or there aren't a lot of industry stuff going on, it's kind of a perfect opportunity to take risks and do a weird show,
weirdos,
whatever.
The weirdos always are the ones that stand out in small towns, in smaller areas.
There's no like, it's not you're not an apprentice, a carpenter, so you don't need to do this set path in those worlds. So why are you? And yet they do. I
think Bobcat is a good example of like the first Bostonian to really buck that system, and just the sort of pushback that he got for it, because he was different, and that made him popular. And the people that thought that this was a time-based career path as opposed to a skill and merit-based career path, got really upset. They were like, it's not your time.
There's a lot of luck to it too.
Yeah.
That it's not in people's control. So, it's weird that people haven't learned that lesson, and we've known this since 1985.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Now we have such like similar foci. Our focus is very similarly because we're both, I guess the best way to describe it is we're both like pop culture historians.
Sure. Like
we're both people that have immersed ourselves in pop culture. We have pushed it there. I mean, your show, TV Guidance Counselor, your podcast, you just crested past 500 episodes. Congratulations. That is upsettingly high number of pods. You started it in 2014?
Yeah, Valentine's Day 2014.
And you have had some wild guests on the show.
People have no business talking to.
Yeah, like I want to talk about that, because like how did you start getting like some of those bigger name guests that because now, I mean, when you see some of the people that you have on, it's like, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like I know a lot of people. Like I've had a number of lives, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a punk rock band in the 90s when I was a teenager, and I know a lot of people from that, and a lot of like Boston music people from the 90s, which was a really fertile time for music here. So that's where you get like Tanya Donnelly and Lou Barlow and Juliana Hatfield and people like that. And I was into punk bands, so that's where you get people like Steve Albini and guys from Dropkick Murphys or The Damned and people like that. Then there's just from doing comedy. So when I started, I've never asked people for anything. Like I was actually saying this year that it's embarrassing, but like one of the reasons, although aside from the fact that the pandemic isn't over and it's getting worse, I never really asked to be booked on stuff.
It's so hard to do that.
Yeah, people would ask me to be like, sure. So like I hate asking for things. So when I started the show, I'm like, I have to. So I just started asking, my friends and people I knew. And then it kind of goes from there. Like people come and have a good time and they're like, oh, you know who you should have on is my friend whoever. But then there's a lot of people that like either like followed me on Twitter randomly who are like heroes of mine, like Bonnie Hunt or, people like that. And I, asked them, or, some people I would just like cold ask. And then some people have come and asked me, which is weird.
Yeah. They're like, hey, can I do your show?
Yeah. Or they listen. Like that's the thing too. There's a lot of people who listen to it that shock me, that even haven't been on, but are like notable people. And they've like turned other people onto it who are of note, who then I have had on the show.
I mean, that is kind of like that word of mouth of having that sort of skill to push it forward and people are like, I like this. Now,
'Cause that's all I have to offer is like, you might have fun. Like there's no other reason you would do the show.
but I mean, that's not necessarily true because it's not just that you're having fun. But it's part that you get to be a part of something that is, it's there. It's fun. It's unique. And people are going to listen to it. People are going to be turned on to your like I know that I'm going to have listeners that have never heard of you that are going to be like, I like this guy. And then they're going to follow you and then they're going to listen to your podcast. So like, there is that aspect to it.
Yeah, everything is sort of a niche microcast now. So I always look at it like whenever I'm doing stuff or like promoting the show or anything like that, I'm like, well, if I got one new listener out of doing this thing, that's cool. And which is a really weird way to look at building audiences, So I think people look at things more that way now in the current state of media.
It is interesting because like I'll have somebody, they'll sign up for the Patreon and I'll message them and I'll be like, oh my God, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You have no idea how much this means to me. And they're like, hey, I know it's only $10 and it's not much. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, I live my life by $10. Yeah. Like $10 a month times X or $5 a month. Like that's how I live. And I was like, don't belittle the fact that you are one of the people hoisting me up into living.
Yeah, but it's them putting, putting their money where their interests are directly instead of having to go that, circuitous way through advertising or whatever.
Yeah. There was that temptation for me to not do a Patreon and to try to start to like rebuild. But also like I've been doing this since 2013. I've been podcasting since 2013 when we did the first episode of Unpops, which is also like such a high to start on, to have your first ever podcast be on Cracked.
Yeah. I mean, and that's probably why you were reticent to do a Patreon, because it seems like you're passing a hat around or begging for money, and it was weird for me to do that. But then once I got or like talk to people that give to them, they're psyched about it. Like they're like, you have $5 a month, I love it.
It does definitely mean the world to have somebody be like, least I could do for all the you've given me for the past 8 years or something like that. And then a lot of people they'll hit you up and be like, how do I do this? And it's like, well, eat shit for 6 years for free,
or do stuff people like and they might find it. It's because at the end of the day, I think I make like $350 a month or something on my Patreon. I've put out like 2,500 hours of free content.
Yeah. But the ads for the non-Patreon episode though, that helps out a lot too.
I don't do any ads.
Oh, so you okay? So wow.
Yeah, I did them once just kind of as a lark to like see if because I didn't want to advertise anything I didn't like or use.
Was it worth your integrity? I guess is the question, right?
I did it with Magic Spoon, who were a nice company. Like I like that company.
Oh yeah, they're cereal.
And I'm a big cereal guy, and it kind of worked with the show because I like cereal and cartoons. And it was fine. I didn't mind doing it, but at the same time, I was like, I wouldn't want to scramble and do this every week. Yeah,
that's fair. I do like I like that because finding those low carb cereals, because I love cereal, but I have a body image thing, man. I can't keep eating carbs.
Well, you're in shape. I mean, I need to lose like some serious pounds. I've packed on some serious depression weight over the pandemic.
So we did the opposite.
Yeah.
Because I was depressed, but when I get depressed, I don't wallow. I force myself to be. I self-flagellate. So like me, like I went running. I would run like every day. And then it was really to punish myself for being in the position I was in.
Yeah, that's a healthy masochism, whereas I go into a depression hedonism.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's healthy. My knees hurt so bad now. But it's definitely. But I also, because I grew up very chubby and like, I was the biggest kid in my class. And so even now, after I do all this work and I'll see like my little tum jiggling in a video, I'm like, oh, and I get really into it on myself. I get angry with myself about this thing that it's like, dude, you are 40. Like you're a 40-year-old man. You're in better shape than like 95% of 40-year-old men.
Oh yeah, if not higher than that. Yeah.
And yet I still am like, yeah, but it's not like when I was 27.
Nothing is.
Yeah, it's wild to me.
For better or worse.
So I want to talk about the show because we've talked a little bit about your experience with it, but I really want you, like, what's your elevator pitch when you're explaining the show? Because I definitely think that my listeners are going to want to listen to it if they haven't already.
Yeah, it's basically the concept of the show is I own almost every issue of TV Guide magazine. Someone picks an old issue, they go through it and kind of write down what they would watch that week in prime time, and then the show is us going through the week talking about their choices.
Mm-hmm.
That's the like bare minimum skeleton of the show. But it ends up being this sort of discussion, especially of like pre-millennium media, of shared experience and things in common that we are kind of missing now in a lot of ways, where, you know, two people, if we didn't know each other at all, we could be very different or have very different outlooks. But if we could be like, hey, did you ever see that episode of the Brady Bunch? Like, yeah, I did. And you instantly have a thing now. And that has been surprising how many people have that. And because a lot of the guests are people whose, you know, work they're writing or movies or TV or whatever they worked on, I have an affinity for. It ends up that we all almost always have a lot in common and get along really well, because for whatever it was about the stuff they made that connected with me is a kind of thing we have where we have similar interests. You know, we watch the same stuff or we like the same things, and that's an interesting thing that comes out of it. But it ends up being just pretty loose conversations that go in any direction based around that kind of skeleton.
Yeah, around the TV Guide. So it really is sort of like it's a campfire conversation, really, when you think about it. Like, you guys are talking about a specific week in that, and it's great. And I know I'm going to be recording an episode that will come out, you know, I'm guessing early 2022. Because you're so far ahead of me as far as
I'm
you're
like 6
recording.
weeks ahead,
That's
usually.
wild to me.
Well, it's not a timely show, so you know
That's
we're
true.
talking about old stuff. So, and I like to bank them because I edit stuff heavily, and you know, so that, and I'm just like paranoid that I'll run out of episodes. Like, I haven't missed a week.
Can I say something? I pay an editor, and it's the best use of my money, because I would go so wild. And he's amazing.
I like it.
My editors.
I like editing.
I edit because I do a monthly show with Kim Crawl called Ugh Fine, and I edit that myself. But I'm not a professional editor, so I go to a professional editor who is unbelievable and just like kind also, and will like check on things with me and isn't particularly demanding, or like I tried with other editors and they were like kind of like demanding and a little rude almost about it. And I was like, well, I'm paying you like,
yeah.
But I'm very excited because I had given you options. You picked one of this TV Guide. I looked through it and I hated it. I hated because it seemed like it was going to be a good idea, but then I remembered it was the TV Guide, so the article wasn't going to be long the way, and everything was like kind of trite. So I ended up, I came back and I went and I bought this copy of TV Guide. You were like, I'll scan it for you. I'm like, don't worry about it. I want to hold it in my hands and read it. So when we get to my episode, it will be the January 20th through 26th of 1996. Now, it's also the sci-fi and fantasy issue, which is very important to me. And it's also me being like 14.
Yeah, that's like the sweet spot tends to be between like 8 and 12-ish. Because you're like you're old enough to have your own taste, but not old enough to like leave the house or really do much. But especially with stuff like in the mid 90s, like sci-fi stuff for people like us, 14, 16 kind of falls into that category a little more.
It's also a good example of like the nerds aspect of it, where it's like, oh, well, I wasn't doing anything because I wasn't cool. You know,
you just didn't know.
And it's not like we had streaming platforms where we could choose whatever we wanted to watch whenever we wanted to watch.
And that's interesting as well, because there's another factor where, you know, a lot of things that we ended up really liking, we kind of stumbled on, and we wouldn't normally have watched them otherwise if we had a choice. Like I always say, now you can watch whatever you want as long as you already know what you like.
That's true. I'm in my second rewatch of The Next Generation.
Yeah. And people will, you know, even if you try a show now, like, I don't like the first 5 minutes, I don't like the first episode, I'm not going to watch it anymore. But we would invest in it because we're like, well, what else am I going to do? There's nothing else I can pull up. So you'd watch it, and oftentimes that stuff ends up becoming some of your favorite stuff. So we just consumed things differently.
It is kind of funny when you think about like the kind of shows that ended up being popular, and there's no necessarily rhyme or reason. Like some shows are just like, well, this is what's available. And some shows are Cheers. And you're like, well, this is just a brilliant show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, TV, especially when we were growing up, when you would get quality stuff, it was kind of despite everything because, aside from pay channels like HBO, TV literally just existed to show you commercials. Yeah. So the fact that the thing they're putting to entice you so that you'll watch the commercials ends up being really good, and it's jumped through all these hurdles and different people and is still good, is kind of incredible.
It's definitely one of those things where you're kind of like, huh, all right. Like it's basically run a gauntlet to get there. And it's funny too, because a lot of the stuff that we love, that we love and prize are commercials. I think a good example of that is like when any of the cartoons that we grew up with, they're literally just 22-minute commercials for toys.
Exist without deregulation. Yeah. 1968, the Hot Wheels cartoon made them write laws that said you couldn't do that.
And that lasted the 70s, and then Reagan showed up.
And Reagan repealed it. Yep. But, because they didn't want marketing to children. And then literally, we were inundated with stuff that was just to sell you things.
And and because of that, we get like the nostalgia of things like, I think He-Man is a good example, like Masters of the Universe, because there was this big like pushback against the Masters of the Universe revelation by these fans that were mad that it wasn't what they wanted out of He-Man or whatever. And I'm like, you do know that show was bad that we grew up with, right?
Yeah. It was terrible.
Yeah.
It had but it was aimed at kids, and it was very repetitive, and they had to make 65 in a year.
I think I say this all the time, and especially, and I think you would be one that would agree with me, but, and especially because, we are mired in pop culture. It is what we do. It's how we pay our bills. But it's not the art necessarily that you like, but it's the feeling of a time and the memories of a time when you didn't have to pay bills or taxes or rent, and all you had to do was just consume and learn.
Well, TV is unique in that it's piped into your home as well. So unlike movies or a show where you go out and see it and it's an event, this is in your environment, in your world, and so it inherently becomes something people have more of a kinship to, because it's tied to their sort of day-to-day life, especially in the frequency.
Yeah.
If something like Masters of the Universe, if you're watching it every morning for 2 years and you're only 6, a quarter of your life, you're watching something every day, it's going to occupy a place in your brain. But it's always amazing to me that when any of those 80 shows that existed either to, capitalize on a movie, like Batman the Animated Series did, which would not have existed if not for the movie's success.
Yeah.
Or something like The Real Ghostbusters, have really good shows. They make some really good episodes. Like, that shouldn't be, and is kind of incredible.
It's funny when you look at who the writers are of those shows.
Oh, yeah.
And like the creative, like when you look at something like Real Ghostbusters, and you look at like this J. Michael Straczynski, who, went on to write
DeMatteis.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And then when Straczynski, aside from being a very accomplished comics writer as well, and novelist, but, he also, created like the movie Changeling that Clint Eastwood directed. And he's just like, oh yeah. Or like Paul Dini with Batman the Animated Series, teaming up with Bruce Timm and creating an entire universe. And Dini got, he cut his teeth on they both cut their teeth on He-Man, actually.
Yeah, He-Man. Yeah, Bruce Timm used to draw the comics that came with the toys.
Yeah.
And yeah, Dini worked at Filmation, and then he worked on Droids and a bunch of Dharma shows.
It's definitely one of those things, because I remember Straczynski's book, the Becoming Superman book, which if you haven't read it, you should. It's pretty great. Wild background on this guy. But he talked about how he was working on He-Man, and then he got shifted directly to She-Ra, and they're like, now you need to make this. And he's like, look, man, we were trying to make good shows. And then he went over to Real Ghostbusters as well. And he's like, look, man, we were always doing our best while we were fighting corporations that were telling us what we could and couldn't do.
Yeah, and what you had to do. Like a lot of times it'd be like, include this vehicle.
Yeah, here it is.
Don't care. It just has to be in there.
Yeah.
Or, even something like Transformers, which, was not a design toy line. It was an amalgam of 10 different toy lines.
Yeah. And 2 different shows.
Yeah. And then they were like, okay, make a show out of that.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah. We're supposed to do what? I think Power Rangers is a good example of that too, where it's really just found art that they were like, all right, well, we found this. Now let's redub it and do some American acting and let's move on.
The interesting thing about that too is that they tried it with that same footage 3 different times before it hit his Power Rangers.
I mean, yeah.
And one of them, I forget what it was called. It's called like Dragon Squad or something. They tried to more do like a What's Up Tiger Lily thing. And then they aired it on like USA Network. And then they aired it on MTV. Like they were trying to find like a hip audience for it. Yeah. And that it was and it just didn't work. It didn't work. And then finally it all clicks in like 92.
Yeah. I mean, and boy, did it, right? It's funny too, when you look at it, because you're like, oh, this is it's not a good show. But it really did capture this insane zeitgeist, which is just it's weird to me. Now, there's an interesting thing about my show, Ken. I don't know if you knew this, but if you sign up for my Patreon at the $10 producer level, I say your name during the show. Oh, what a steal! You get me to say your name twice a month out loud. How exciting is that? And I'm going to read off a couple of names of people that are my producers. And Ken, we can interact with these names. We can talk about them. We can ignore them if you want. We can do whatever. We can literally roll with whatever we want. So I would like to thank my producers, including Jeff Hordes, the Christmas Frittatas. They love to deal with the JHCF acronym, and I do love it. So
they have fake names.
Oh, of course, yeah. Everybody, I let them write whatever they want as long as it's not being like, oh, the Jews, or like as long as it's not that, it's fine. I have Farty Marty's Nerd Party, These 7 Bs, Lemming Malloy, Manischewitz Molotov says, eat the rich. Hell yeah. Superman Family issue 184. The scene in Meet Joe Black where Brad Pitt dies.
I like how specific those are. I'd like to think those aren't people, but are actually the anthropomorphized those things.
Somebody wished for that to be a real boy, and the first thing he did was sign up for my Patreon, and I appreciate it. Jeff's Happy Christmas Face. Also, I love Christmas, by the way. I don't know if you've picked that up. I'm a big Christmas fan.
Same. And I'm an atheist. It's real weird.
Same. Honestly, I vibe out. So we're going to talk about that too, because this is a whole thing. I'm the law, martial law, and I hate superheroes. Mr. Billy Beck. Jeff watches Batman and likes sports. That's true. Kimball. Get vaccinated, you chuckleheads. The 5G lets you see sound, and then you can see your friends again. Let's go. When I got vaccinated, I cried.
Yeah.
After my first shot. Yeah, it was weird. I was not expecting.
It was a weird relief in a way, but if we only knew.
I know. Yeah. So somebody just posted a thing that said, boy, that vaccine sure was a light at the middle of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Shout out to Blackagar Boltagon.
I went to high school with a Blackagar Boltagon.
Yeah? He probably couldn't talk much though, huh?
No.
Resource room because he was mute. Yeah. Shout out to Big Booty Boy 42069.
I get it.
Yeah, you get it. Aaron, Wyoming isn't real. Meyer. Jared Ruan. You get it, Jared. I'm sorry if I your name up there. Tyler Wielgosh or Vielgosh or Wildgosh. I said it right one time and then I blew it again. Shout out to the Human Bonsai. Evan Hall. Jeff hates competitive fun. Not true. Patrick Dorr. The Digital Phil. The Bollock. Caitlin Binney. L, insert joke here, Seldo, the Ian McClendon. Jezbut's fiance is going to be a mom. That's exciting. Oh. Shout out to your fiance, Jezbut. Craft beers make my alcoholism look like a neat hobby. Hi, I'm Super Fudge, and welcome to Fudgemania. I bet you read those books when you were a kid.
I did, yeah. Was it Beverly Cleary?
It sure was. I loved me some Fudgemania. And Super Fudge and Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing.
Ramona Quimby?
Same author, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Mef J, bold and brash, more like belongs in the trash. Russell from Jersey, pizza, bagels, Taylor ham. Shout out to Vortispin. Shout out to Norm from Cheers. Shebrew Sleeps, Mind Freak 555, Taurus Bulba. That sounds like a Pokemon, right?
A little bit, or it sounds more like a villain in Dune.
Fair. That's very fair. Or like James Bond Jr. Remember James Bond Jr.?
Yeah. Actually, there's a unrelated James Bond Jr. book series that's written by Charlie Higson, who's a guy I had on the show a couple months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
And you were like, did you know about the cartoon, or was that before?
He did. He's a comedy writer. So he had a show called The Fast Show in England that was sort of like Mr. Show, was sort of contemporary of that. I used to write for Craig Ferguson and like Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer, if you know who they are.
Wow.
And yeah, he writes a lot of books. Actually, he did the Stuart Gordon movie, Kingdom of Ants, if you remember that movie.
I do not remember that movie.
Mid-90s Stuart Gordon movie. That's based on one of Charlie Higson's novels.
Shout out. Shout out to Huey Freeman, Lisa Harden. You know Lisa. She was my co-producer for Mint on Cart.
Oh, yeah.
Twitch.tv/Firechild460. It's good use of that $10 a month, man. Get that plug in. Shout out to Burrito Mouth. Ooh, Dr. DNA. Steven. Oh, it's simple. I like it.
Yeah, he's claimed it.
Yeah. Shout out to Silius Ruby. Kelly Stanaway. Adrienne. I didn't kill my wife. The most well-prepared dead guy. Jennifer Fendelander. Art Fartigan. Frankly Amish. Koi Pham. Art and mentoring. Do you know Koi, the artist?
I don't know. Maybe.
Fantastic. He did like Mighty Avengers with Dan Slott and Christos Gage and everything. Real good. It's like Silver Age style artist. Incredible. The Ghost of Dave Thomas. Sophia Hapgood, Psychic Services. Russell Richardson, the Sass Bitch Stan. Show me in the rules where it says a dog can't play basketball. I like that somebody used that as their just an Air Bud reference.
You can probably hear my cat in the background, by the way. She's yelling.
I like that.
Just so the listeners know what that weird noise is.
It's a cat. Is somebody beating a cat? And you're like, no,
she looks out the window and yells at them.
She's just needy.
She's like 17. She's little.
Shout out to Murph the Murph. Shout out to Dan Hackroyd. Shout out to Willem Dafoe's baffling big bonanza. That was actually the original title of the new Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mackenzie Chill. Shout out to @NerdNumbers, Ricky Cilantro, Gray Man of the Fireside Chronicles. Irradiated Mutant Man, Andrew Howe, the AV Foundry, Gregarious Gregorio, Captain Fatstrong, Jessica Robertson, @Gavin_not with 2 T's, Cody Beck Jr. Is it rude to use this bit to ask for comedian Keith Carey? It sure is, every time. No, Jeff May is never going to have a history podcast, guys. Believe me, I asked very nicely. Which
I really thought you were going to say hysterectomy.
That's true. I got to get rid of these.
True. Yeah.
Get rid of this useless uterus. Weirdly enough, somebody made the comment that Radvertising, the show that I have coming out, is technically a history podcast.
Oh, well, there you go. You got fooled.
I know. Although I consider it more of a sociological or anthropological podcast. But
well, Jeff, once a podcast is finished, isn't it all a history?
You rotten son of a. Shout out to Normal Man, Andrew McGuire. Jolly Buckaroo's mom kicked Cancer square in the dick. You, Cancer. Hell yeah. Dill Havarti. That's my favorite cheese. What's your favorite cheese?
Well, it depends on the application.
Okay, that's fair. What's your favorite cheese on a sandwich?
Again, would depend on the sandwich, but if I'm gonna go, I'd probably just like a sharp cheddar.
You like a sharp cheddar?
Like turkey, deli mustard, green apple, sharp cheddar.
Fair. How about on a cracker?
Then I would go with pub cheese, probably like a blue cheese cheddar horseradish blend.
Ooh, that is an interesting choice of pub cheese. One time I put string cheese, I dipped it in pub cheese, and then I could see through time.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah. Shout out to Exploding Runes, JK, Jeff May's biggest fan, for Shizzless Joan, David, Knife Boot, Henson. That's not a knife boot. That's a knife boot.
How did he convey the accent to read that in? Or did
Somebody
he just-
asked me literally, they said, can you say this in an Australian accent?
Oh, so they'll put like stage directions into these.
I'll do it, man. I am a whore. I will do I will do it. I will absolutely do it. No question about it. Funky J, Saint Gut Free, Instagrams at Bob_of_skull. An action figure of Clippy at C Dr. Video, CESEE, C Dr. Video. C2E2 AM Adventures. You ever go to C2E2?
No, it was mostly gaming, right?
No. It's Comic Con.
No?
It's Reed's big Comic Con before they really took over New York.
No, I never did because they did it. But what is the gaming one? Isn't there a gaming one like that?
There's one in Indiana or Indianapolis. It's called Gen Con.
No, I thought there was one that had like a similar name. Maybe I'm just.
Oh, you're thinking of E3?
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
They've had it in Boston before.
C2E2 is the Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo. So C2,
I've never
E2.
been. Only been to Chicago once.
Oh yeah, I love it. I really
Okay.
like Chicago.
There's a good toy store there.
I love that.
Toy du jour.
I ended up I was touring when I was in Portland. I was doing a show in Portland, Maine, and as I was leaving, about to go home, I drove by a vintage toy store and literally banged a U-turn right before I got onto the highway and went back in.
When I was in my band in high school, so it's like 96 to 98, they hated me for a variety of reasons. But I used to make a stop at every video store when we were on tour, and I'd sign up for a membership and then also like cruise the previewed videos section. And it was really annoying in hindsight.
Fair. No, you're not wrong for that. Shout out to an NFT of He-Man Skull Skeletor. Shout out to that.
I have a
Yeah.
point of order. If you're any sexual act with Skeletor would be skull.
No, it would only be the head would be skull. Otherwise, it would be skeleton. But he also,
he's a skull.
well, he's a skull on a meat body.
That's true.
So his face is a skull. So if you're his face, it would be a skull.
If he's using his face, it also is.
Well, then he's skull you,
Okay.
I guess. Well, that's going to have a lot of beeps on it for the non-Patreon people.
That also made my brain just went Castle Grayskull.
We're all there. I have one right next to me. I have a Castle Grayskull right next to me. Where's Bane? Shout out to Ben Mendelsohn for that beautiful line delivery in Dark Knight Rises. Jeff May loves the meat Millie. Flesh, your friend. Poinsettia Jingle. Mike Gouts, Grumblebee, and Cronenberger. So those are my producers at the $10 tier at patreon.com/Jeff May. If you want to pay $10 a month, I will say your name out loud because I have no shame. Okay.
That was like 25 people.
That was way more than that. It was like 85.
Jeez.
Yeah.
You're doing all right.
I'm doing what I can, man. But you have like a real people job too on top of your podcast,
I do,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. See, that's
it's why I don't hustle as hard.
yeah. I have to do this or I starve.
Yeah.
But it's all, I mean, I love doing this too. It's a lot of fun. Plus the names are so unique. It's something you can really play with.
It's fun.
So I wanted to talk a little bit too about one of the times that when you did Mint on Card. And it's one of my favorite things because you come out to LA and you do recordings, or you would. And is your life a lot easier now that you can you do Zoom recordings?
Yeah, it's easier, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
I have to spend more time, like, episodes take me longer because I have to scan an issue, which takes a couple hours. But I also have had guests on from cities I'm not in. So I've had people in like Ireland and Canada and England, which is good.
It was a lot better when I left Sideshow because it used to be I'd have to record it like at Sideshow.
Right.
Which is like kind of a pain in the to get to because it's like, oh, you're in LA. Do you want to drive for an hour?
Yeah, no, I love that I can do it anytime, and it's right here, and I don't have to leave my office, and I don't have to rely on anyone else.
How many times do people comment on your office when you sign on? Because your office is wild.
Pretty much every time.
Yeah.
Every single time. Yeah.
Because you
Yeah,
have several old, smaller tube TVs that are just blaring static. And then you have like random cans of Pepsi. I see Gumby behind you.
Yep.
I mean, it really is just a mishmash. I see a small plush Godzilla. It has very Pee-wee's Playhouse vibes.
That's really my whole life goal, is to live in either Pee-wee's Playhouse or Over Our Heads from Facts of Life. Yeah, we get a Magnum PI commemorative plate back here.
Fair.
We got a jar of the stuff.
You got to get the stuff, man.
Yeah.
You can't really. I have, if I were to angle it up, I've got comics all behind me, but if you look at the top, I have, Masters of the Universe toys and Batman statues and Optimus Prime and a giant.
This is far more organized.
What, mine or yours?
Yeah, yours.
No, it's not. If I were to angle any way that was off to the side, if I were to angle my camera down, you would just see boxes and frames on the floor.
Yeah, and I suspected you didn't have pants on, but now I've confirmed it.
Yeah, well, what do you want from me? I'm working from home.
It explains the Castle Grayskull right next to you.
It's sure. Look, Mattel sent that to me, and they're awesome. But I'm just like, when I got it, I was like, this is so great. And then my roommate's like, what are you gonna do with it? And I was like, fair question. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been trying to just collect less stuff. Like, I actually got rid of all my comics, and I'm totally digital.
Oof.
With
How'd that feel?
Exceptions.
Yeah, you held on to the ones that mattered to you, or what would you hold on to?
Like my original run of the Tick comics, I have. I used to save up, and a couple times a year in the 80s, I would buy like a 50s horror comic, like a pre-code horror comic. So I still kept those. But I read them way more now because they're with me all the time. Same with all my magazines and all that kind of stuff.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. I unloaded my comics at one point in time, and then I kind of refilled them.
Oh yeah. I know that tale.
Yeah. So I haven't I did when I moved to my new apartment, I had too many long boxes, and I sold about 10 long boxes worth of comics. I got decent money for them.
Yeah.
All things considered.
When I was a kid, I used to make money flipping collections. So this was like the late 80s, early 90s. And I would go to flea markets and stuff, and there'd be someone who's like, comics, 10 cents each. And I'd be like, how about for the whole box? I'll give you $20. And then I'd pull out what I wanted and sell the rest to the comic store and make a profit. And over time, I think by the early 2000s, I had 10 issues of Giant Size X-Men 1. And I would sell one every year, kind of, when I needed money in my 20s and in college. And this was before stuff got worth money again, so they would be worth less and less every year. And I think the last one I sold was for like $800 or something in like 2005.
Oh wow, yeah, but yeah, that's one of those things where you're like, oh, I kind of wish I held on to that.
Yeah, but
and what are you gonna do?
I needed the money then.
I pulled a out of a pack of 1992 Score baseball cards. I pulled an autographed Mickey Mantle insert. And it was worth like $500 at the time. Even then, I'm a dip 11-year-old with a $500 baseball card. But then I ended up selling it for rent in college for like $200 when it was like a bottomed out market.
But most stuff, like I got in Wizard once, I got a signed Will Eisner Spirit card. That was pretty cool. But most stuff, that's kind of the great thing about now, is you can get almost anything easily if you have enough money. If you really want to again, you can get it. Whereas before it was like you couldn't even get stuff, even if you were willing to pay like whatever. Like
you'd have to go find it. Well, that was I ended up buying a from Masters of the Universe a Clawful mint on card from 1980. I think this one's a 1984 Clawful, graded at an 8.5 or at 85. And I paid, I paid $400 for it.
Yeah.
But that's also a piece of art that I'd wanted my whole life since you couldn't get them anymore. And I was like, I just want to have this thing in the package, looking cool. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah. I mean, the stuff I keep is stuff that I couldn't get again. So like if I have something autographed or like a piece of original art, like I have Stephen Bissett drew me a Swamp Thing for Christmas one year. So it's this red and green and white Swamp Thing that I have framed up here, and it's awesome, and like that I'll always keep. And
I have a
that kind
Phil
of
Hester Swamp Thing.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Bissette's awesome. Like he's a Vermont guy, and so I have like he did the forward to this Outer Limits book, and I have it here somewhere. But he like drew me the Zanti Misfits inside, and like that stuff I won't get rid of.
Yeah, Steve Bissette, famously a famous comic artist, by the way. For those of you who are listening and have no idea who the hell we're talking about,
Yes.
Steve Bissette is considered one of the sort of classic Silver Age, sort of like macabre artists.
Well, yeah, he created John Constantine.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of those people that paired really well with Alan Moore.
Yeah, until they didn't.
That happened.
Which happens with everyone. Alan Moore.
Yeah. Alan Moore is a very interesting cat because his stuff is great. And also, I do not ever want to have a conversation with him.
I've met him. He's perfectly personable. I get where his like cantankerism comes from. He's also an old man now, but
he was an old man when he was 28.
Yeah, he's also one of those guys that there's certain people that I think like to with people, and they just keep waiting for someone to tell them to go themselves, and then if they never do,
they just keep rolling with it.
It's out of control. Yeah, he's like kind of falls into that category.
Yeah, man, that would be nice to be like go yourself to somebody like that's being all kind of about stuff.
Like when I had Steve Albini on, like Albini is notoriously like grumpy, and people always are like, "Oh, he's such an asshole" and all this stuff. But within like a minute of us doing the show, it's like, yeah, let's not do the character kind of thing, And we end up talking about Speed Racer for an hour.
Did you call him out and be like, "We're not doing that"?
So, sort of. Like he kind of got it,
He was like, "All right, fine. I'll behave." I was gonna say too, and I'm sorry I got distracted, but we did a mint on card one time, and I'm hosting the show, of course, because it's my show, and I'm a control freak, and I'm hosting it. You're on the show, and as I'm perusing the crowd, interacting with them, I look around. I'm like, is that Olivia Dabo? Yeah. Is that the Wonder Years in Star Trek: The Next Generation? Is that Star Sapphire, Olivia Dabo? And it sure was in the crowd. And then behind her, I was like, is that the Monster Squad?
Yes.
You brought the most eclectic crowd with you of people that I'm assuming you would recorded with while you were in town. And you were probably like, I'm doing like 2 shows and this is one of them.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that's happened that I didn't realize was weird for the first couple of years I did the shows, but like I pretty much befriended everyone I had on the show and stay in touch with everybody. And so like when I would be in LA, I'll like meet up with people for lunch or meet up for coffee or something, or if I'm doing a show, they'll come to the show. So like my album recording at Meltdown is funny because there's like 10 or 12 people who I had on my show or in the audience. I mean, there's more than that in the audience in total, but like people, like notable people that you would recognize.
Yeah, like obscure TV celebrities, and you're just like,
I can like hear their laughs on the recording, which is kind of funny.
I was really bummed. I was out of town when you were recording that album, and I was really bummed because I wanted to go there, because that was also, not only would it have been good to see you there, but that was my like home club. Oh
yeah, it was so comfortable. And then that show, Greg Proops and Laura Keitlinger opened the show for me. Which is just ridiculous. It was fun. Yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate loss. It was, in my opinion, the best comedy club in LA.
Oh, I agree. It was the best shows I did anywhere there. And like whenever I've done stuff like the Comedy Store or the Improv, I have not had fun.
It's not that they're bad clubs. It's just that a comedy club audience, like when people are going to just the generic concept of a comedy show where they're going out and they want to have drinks or whatever, that's when it's the Comedy Store or the Improv. They don't necessarily care about the performers as much. That's not to say that that's always the case.
It's more like work. It's more like work in those instances, and it's just like not as fun.
But Nerd Melt came in with a built-in audience of dorks that happened to be into comedy. And that's where it was really easy for me to find my sort of my tribe in fandom when I would perform on those shows, because you're like, oh, these people like the same things that I like, and they're going to be really surprised because I look like such a piece of shit. but I end up, so it's a surprise. It's always been an uphill battle in stand-up comedy when I'm in the nerd sectors, and I'm treated like an invader.
Yeah.
Until it finally, until
use
they,
it to your advantage though.
I mean, I've had
weird.
to, yeah.
It's weird when, like who comes out to see you is always strange. Like it's, yeah, I've had
the weirdest ones are like when I do hometown shows, the people that have been like, I've been dying to see you perform. And it's like somebody that I never talked to in high school that like they were like
weird.
3 grades below me or something. But they like, we might be Facebook friends and they're like, man, I've been waiting for this. It's so good to see you again. And I'm like, yeah, like it's almost a surprise to me, like a great surprise. And also because like the people that show up are not always the people that I grew up with, that we've always been best friends.
Yeah.
That's not always who shows up when I do these hometown shows.
I always get weird things. Like I would, I was lucky enough to I'd open for bigger acts a lot. And so I never really advertise that I do stand up that much. And so like someone I went to high school with would like go to see Bob Saget, and then I come out on stage and they're like, what the hell? Like a really weird, or like someone I work with, that's happened before too. They're like, you do comedy? And I'm like, yep.
That was when people, like some of the nerds that I grew up with, when they found out that I worked for Sideshow for a while. And then when I left them and they'd be like, oh, that's such a bummer. I'm like, no, it's actually great, because now they're not tethered to me being a risk to their bottom line. Right. And also I'm not being told what I can say anymore on my podcast. Right. So it's better for everyone. Like, yeah, but it was pretty cool that you worked for them. I'm like, yeah, but it's better that I'm not working for them. But it's like, but it was awesome. You did.
We've all moved on.
Yeah. I'm like, well, everybody's better off without this situation. But I definitely, like, some of the people like, I can't believe it. I had one person be like, man, what's it like to be the most famous person from our high school? or from our graduating class, I think they said. And I just went, it means that we have a weak graduating class.
Yeah.
And I was like, that I can't be it. I can't be the name. The Shepherd Hill class of 1999 has got to do better than this. Cause
at least get an infamous person.
Yeah. Give me a serial killer or something.
Yeah, totally.
It's funny too, because, one of my guests that I had on before, Sean McCune, was one of my students. So we're from the same hometown, right. But he plays for the Cowboys. So I'm like, well, there's no way I'm ever going to be the most famous person from our high school. That's like not going to happen. Like it's just not going to be.
He solved that problem for you.
He did. My student ruined my life. He got a touchdown on Thanksgiving. How am I? And I'm talking about, I'm going to do a commercials podcast next.
Took a lot of pressure off you.
It really did, to be honest. But that was very, very much like one of the people, because like oftentimes I would be like quoted in like Cracked articles or something. And people were like, read about you in Cracked again, man. This is wild. And I'm just like, man, I don't think you understand what niche markets are. But
yeah. Oh yeah. It's always weird. Like I also been lucky enough that they've had a number of times they've been featured in the Globe, the Boston Globe, with like a photographer came to my house and stuff. And I remember I was at work one day, and I think I'd been in like the Sunday Globe or something. And this woman I never really even talked to at work just came over to my desk and like threw the paper down. And she's like, I was reading my paper. I was like, why is this guy from work in the paper?
You're like, this is nice.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay.
What do you mind if I ask what is your day job?
Oh, no. Yeah, I work in Medicaid compliance. I have for like 16 years.
Okay. And what does that mean?
So Medicaid is like the health insurance for people low income, no income.
Oh, definitely. I definitely know what that is.
Yeah. So in Massachusetts, like I am like the liaison between the government regulators and the plan, like to make sure that everything's above board and like the contracts are being fulfilled correctly and people are getting the services and that kind of stuff.
It's a good guy job.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, doctors aren't committing fraud and, people are getting things they need. Yeah. That's another reason why I like don't mind having a day job, because ultimately that job at the end of the day, like people are better off if I'm like doing it.
Yeah. And plus it's one of those things where it seems like a job that you can leave at the office.
Oh yeah.
Where it's not
totally. Yeah. It's like, Yeah, I really, my life improved significantly when I stopped trying to have a day job that was like creative or I thought would like be any kind of connection to like wanting to be like a writer or a performer or anything, and just like is a vehicle for money so I can do stuff I like.
Yeah. I mean, well, I got to be honest, like with teaching, it was one of those things where summers were great, but during the school year, everyone's like, wow, it must be nice to be done with work by 2:30 or 3:00. I'm like, I work until like 6 to 7 p.m. every night. I'm up at 6 a.m. I'm in school at 7.
Yeah, I've said to people when they say that, and I have friends who are teachers, I'm like, yeah, they get the summer off technically, but they probably work the same amount of hours in a year that you do.
Yeah. And we have to get summer jobs because the job doesn't necessarily pay as much as that. So a couple more. I'm gonna have a couple questions. We're gonna finish this. We're gonna have a little bonus content for the patrons afterwards. But I wanted to ask you because obviously TV is the thing that you are most known for. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions about TV shows. For your opinions on that. And first and foremost, what do you consider to be like? I would say like the top 3 TV shows you've ever seen.
Ooh, that's tough. There's so many genres. Fringe is up there.
Oh, you like Fringe? Yeah.
Fringe is easily in my top 3. That's probably one of the best sci-fi shows of all time, easily of the 21st century. Barney Miller is up there,
Really?
Which is one of the best written comedies of all time. It's like the perfect multicam sitcom. They did 200 episodes. That's just 5 characters in one room, and it never gets old. It's like a perfect example of a good show. Twilight Zone.
Fair.
Like that's a show that made us all better people, to a degree, and then didn't.
Some of us got the lessons.
Yeah, and then like The Young Ones is really important for me. That was like a life changer.
I know a lot of my like punk rock friends really, really gravitate towards that show.
Yeah, I mean, I literally was 5 years old and had insomnia and was flipping through the channels one night, and MTV used to show it late at night in an hour block with the Monkees, and I saw The Damned on The Young Ones playing a song called Video Nasty, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but there's a vampire singing fast, angry music, and this is everything I like in the world now.
That's rad. Now, what would be shows that give me 1 or 2 shows that you think most people have never seen that you would really suggest? They'd be like, oh, you've never seen X, you have to see it. Or like underrated, I guess would be a good example of that.
Car 54, Where Are You? 1963, 1964. It's Nat Heinken who did the Phil Silver show. It is like, if you like a show like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Car 54, Where Are You is the sort of template for those kinds of shows, and is just perfect. They're like a puzzle box of humor. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think of what I revisit. Newhart's up there. The 80s Newhart show.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them end up being sitcoms because I feel like now, especially younger people, really write off sitcoms, and especially multicam sitcoms, because they grew up on them being sort of Disney and Nickelodeon shows, which is not the case.
No. Back in the day, we had 3 networks.
Yeah, and a show like Newhart, which is just so funny and weird and great, is well worth watching. Kate and Allie's another one that is a pretty timeless show.
Solid Jane Curtin vehicle.
Yep. It's just 2 friends, and it's written really well, and it's funny, and it holds up. Like, that's a great show as well.
I remember seeing ads for that. I used to have a Christmas tape from like 1986 or 1987 that had the Alf Christmas special on it.
Oh,
and during the Alf, which it's wild. If you've never seen today, by the way, because I'm releasing this on, I'm going to release this on Christmas, a Tuesday show dropping on a Saturday. If I can, I'm going to do that. If it's edited in time. If not, sorry, I've been lying. Definitely watch the Alf Christmas special because it is unhinged. It is the weirdest, wildest Christmas special you'll ever see.
Molly Hagan is a friend of mine, and I've had on the show, is in that Alf Christmas special. And when I had her on, we talk about it at length.
Was she Tiffany?
I forget what her character name is.
Like the main guest star?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. She was in Our House, I believe. Was that the show that she was on as well?
No, then it's someone else.
It's all right.
Molly plays in that. Yeah. But she was like, at one point she got into a political argument with Paul Fusco, who is Alf. But like he was in character, like in between. It's just ridiculous.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard some pretty nightmarish scenario situations about the Alf puppetry and puppeteer and all that. But I remember the Kate and Allie commercial that they would play on that, and I remember specifically her holding up a toilet seat that says only $39.95, and it was like a wreath toilet seat.
Oh yeah.
I'll always remember that Kate and Allie commercial.
SCTV is also really high up on that list for me.
Canadian SNL.
That's almost a disservice. That is a disservice to SCTV.
But that might be a disservice to it. But when we're talking things in the cultural zeitgeist, I have to give a good touchstone for it.
Yeah. Although if it's Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy,
John Candy.
Yeah. And so if you know people from like people feel like Schitt's Creek or that kind of stuff, it's like all those people.
It's where they started.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, have you watched the new Saved by the Bell?
No, I haven't seen it.
You should do that.
I've heard it's good. And then Ahmed Baruch's sister Maureen Baruch directed some episodes of it for the new season, I think.
It is pound for pound the most joke. It's like 30 Rock in just the amount of jokes that are layered onto each other. It's just a joke factory. It doesn't stop. And it's made for us.
Yeah.
It's marketed as being like, ooh, it's for the new generation, but it's not. It's 100% for us, about the new generation. And they nailed it flawlessly.
You know what's funny is I just read yesterday that HBO Max canceled the Head of the Class reboot because it didn't do well. And I'm a big fan of the show Head of the Class, and I didn't even know it existed. So I'm like, if I didn't know about it, no wonder it's not doing well.
Wasn't the doofy guy, was it Dennis that was on that show? Wasn't there a problem with him like directing Nickelodeon shows, and people were a little...
He basically took over Nickelodeon. Like he created iCarly and all the shows that were huge moneymakers for Nickelodeon. And there is kind of a creepy... Yeah,
there's some shady...
Yeah. So he stepped down. But weirdly, the guy who replaced him is Brian Robbins, who also was on Head of the Class.
It was a class of prodigies.
It's true.
You know who took over? Robin Givens.
Yeah.
Also on the show. Ken, we're gonna stick around a little bit for the patrons after that. But for those of you that are listening for free, first off, thank you. We greatly appreciate that. Ken, what do you got going on? What do we have to plug?
Like you mentioned before, episode 500 of my show just aired. I debuted a new theme song to the show that was written and performed by Josh Caterer of the band The Smoking Popes, who are one of my favorite bands, and it's like this awesome theme song.
That's incredible.
Good. We got a bunch of guests coming up. New episodes every week. TVGuidance just did 2 episodes with Robin Ince, who's a great UK comic. Bunch of good stuff coming up.
I love that. And also definitely make sure you follow Ken Reid on social media. On Twitter, Ken, we can find you at Kenneth W. Reid, R-E-I-D. And on Instagram, it's probably the same thing, right?
Yep.
There it is. KENNETHWREID. Make sure you follow Ken on social media because he's a delight. Sometimes he gets into fights with Ann Coulter that go
that is true.
That go crazy viral. Did you get threatened for that?
Oh yeah. I got death threats all the time during the Trump administration.
That's so fun.
Having a tweet go viral is the worst, by the way.
I hate it. I mean, you know why I hate it? Because it's never what I want to go viral.
I had one. I made some offhanded joke, like a dumb joke about stupid anti-vaxxers. This was like 8 months ago, and at least once a month, it'll come back and get shared, and it'll be by people who think I'm serious and are like agreeing, and then people who are like, just posting it, and it's been shared like millions of times, and it's just like a dumb, like it's no different than any one of like 10 dumb things I tweet every day. I
had a friend of mine go viral because like a dude producer did like a creepy photo of her, even though she sent a headshot to use for a flyer for a show. And I had posted a comment, be like, oh no, now what's he going to do with only 39 other comics on the show, making fun of the fact that he's a terrible producer in many ways, because we had a DM conversation about this. Sure as like a lot of people were like, oh, what? So you're coming after her in the comments? I'm like, do you not understand how this world works? And I got people ripping me apart for me having a conversation with my friend.
Of course.
And I'm like, no, you idiot. I don't need to have this fight anymore.
Yeah. Well, tone is very difficult to convey on things. So it's,
I did my what was the tweet, the Yoda tweet where regular old Yoda make me sick to my stomach now when they revealed Baby Yoda or whatever.
Yeah.
And that went so wild.
Oh yeah.
That went like 150,000 likes or something like that. And I was like, this tweet sucks.
It's insane. You never get anything good out of it.
Yeah, you'll get 200 followers, and then that whittles down to 18.
Yeah,
and they want to talk to you about crypto. So guys, definitely follow Ken on social media and check out TV Guidance Counselor. You've got a small backlog to catch up on, and then you can check out my episode coming out the first quarter of 2022.
Yeah, probably mid-February.
Sure, sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. Also, you can check out if you're not a patron and you want to, head to patreon.com/JeffMay, where you get this show, and you also get other shows such as Ugh Fine, the monthly show that I keep with Kim Kroll, as well as hopefully soon, if I could get this thing organized and all the things, radvertising, a sociological anthropological study of 90s advertising.
That's not historical in any way.
No. I don't care if it happened in the past. Time's a flat circle, so it's not historical. Of course, you can follow me at Hey There Jeffro on Twitter and Instagram, and don't bother finding me on Facebook. It's not worth it. I don't do anything anymore. I just plug this show. Thank you all very much. Happy holidays if you are listening to this during the holidays. I appreciate each and every one of you. Be safe, be kind. Don't buy from Amazon. You know the whole drill. And then find me and review this show on review it. Give me a good review. Don't be an asshole. I love you. Bye. Hey everyone, our artwork is created by Justin T. Brown, who can be found at Artness by Justin Brown on Instagram, as well as artnessbyjustinbrown.com. That dope music you heard is by Troy Nababon, available at Troy Nababon on Instagram, as well as at troynababon.com. Nababon is spelled Nababan, and